Every morning, the same woman sat in the back corner of the cafe. Thin frame, worn jacket, tangled hair. Everyone avoided her, called her a drifter, a ghost. Everyone except Sam Rodriguez, a single father who placed a hot coffee and sliced toast in front of her, without a word. Then one morning, the door swung open. 4 bodyguards in black suits, 2 lawyers in pressed gray. They scanned the room and asked, "Who is the man who has been helping her every morning? Who is she? What was it about that poor woman that made them come to Sam?" Sam Rodriguez wiped down the counter for the 3rd time that morning. The rag was damp and gray, but he kept moving it in circles anyway. The cafe smelled like burnt coffee and yesterday's grease. Beacon Street Cafe was not the kind of place people came to for ambiance. They came because it was cheap and open early. He had been working the morning shift for 2 years now. The pay barely covered rent and groceries. His son Luke was 7 years old and needed new shoes every few months. Sam thought about the overdue electric bill sitting on the kitchen table at home, about the way his co-workers looked at him when he picked up extra shifts, like he was desperate. He was desperate, but he hated that they could see it. The door chimed. A woman walked in wearing a dark jacket that looked like it had been pulled from a donation bin. The fabric was faded and the cuffs were frayed. Her hair hung loose and unwashed around her face. She did not make eye contact with anyone. She moved to the back corner and sat down at the same table she always chose, the one by the window that looked out onto the alley. Sam had seen her before. She came in almost every morning now, always quiet, always alone. The other staff called her the drifter. Becca, one of the waitresses, said the woman probably slept in the park. Tony, another co-worker, said she gave him the creeps, but no one ever did anything. They just avoided her. Sam did not avoid her. He walked over with a pot of coffee and a small plate. On the plate was a piece of toast, buttered and cut into smaller pieces. He set both down in front of her without saying anything. She looked up at him briefly. Her eyes were tired. She did not smile, but she nodded. She reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out a handful of coins. She counted them slowly and placed them on the table. It was not enough for both the coffee and the toast, but Sam did not say anything. He just nodded back and walked away. Becca leaned against the counter and shook her head. She said the woman was never going to pay full price. Sam shrugged and told her the woman was not bothering anyone. Becca muttered that she was bothering her and made the place look bad. Sam did not respond. He turned back to the counter and started wiping it down again. This went on for weeks. She came in almost every day. Sam brought her coffee and toast. She paid what she could. Sometimes it was enough. Most times, it was not. Luke's school had sent home a note about a field trip that cost $20. Sam did not have $20. He would have to figure something out. One morning, it was raining hard. The woman came in dripping wet. Her jacket was dark with water and her hair stuck to her face. Sam brought over the coffee and toast. When he set the plate down, he noticed her hands were shaking. She tried to pick up the knife to spread the butter, but her fingers would not cooperate. The knife clattered onto the table. Sam picked up the knife and cut the toast into smaller pieces himself. Then he buttered each piece and set the plate back down. She looked up at him. Her eyes were wet, but he could not tell if it was from the rain or something else. She said, "Thank you," quietly. Her voice was soft and steady. It surprised him. She sounded like someone who used to have a different life. After that, things changed slightly. She still came in every morning, but now she would look at Sam when he brought her coffee. Sometimes she would ask him small questions. How was his day? Was it busy? Simple things. The questions kept coming, and eventually they turned into something closer to conversation. One morning she asked if he had family. He told her he had a son. She asked how old. He said 7. She asked what his name was. He said, "Luke." She nodded and said that was a good name. A few days later, Sam had to bring Luke to the cafe. The babysitter had canceled last minute, and he could not afford to miss a shift. Luke sat at the counter with a coloring book and crayons. He was quiet and well-behaved, but Sam still felt guilty. A cafe at 6 in the morning was no place for a kid. The woman in the corner noticed. She watched Luke for a while, then stood up and walked over. Sam tensed, but she just smiled at Luke and asked if she could see what he was coloring. Luke showed her a picture of a dinosaur. She told him it was very good. Then she asked if he knew how to fold paper into shapes. Luke shook his head. She picked up a napkin and folded it carefully. When she was done, she handed Luke a small paper crane. He stared at it like it was magic. He said, "Wow," and asked if she could teach him. She nodded and sat down next to him. Sam watched from behind the counter. He felt something strange in his chest, something warm and uncomfortable at the same time. Luke looked up at her while they folded and asked why she looked so sad. The woman stopped folding. She looked at Luke for a long time. Then she smiled, but it did not reach her eyes. She said softly that she was not sad right now. Luke seemed satisfied with that answer. After that day, the woman came more often. She would wave at Luke if he was there. She would talk to Sam a little longer. She asked him things, what he liked to do, what he wanted. He told her he used to want to be a chef. She asked why he stopped. He said life got in the way. She nodded like she understood. One morning she asked him if he ever thought about starting over. He laughed and said he did not have the money or the time. She looked at him seriously and asked if he did. Would he? He thought about it. Then he nodded and said, yeah, he would. She smiled. It was the first real smile he had seen from her. She said good. Then one Tuesday morning, everything changed. The breakfast rush had just ended. Sam was clearing tables when he heard voices rising near the woman's corner. A man in an expensive suit stood over her table. His face was red, and his voice was loud. He was saying she should not be allowed in here, that she was making customers uncomfortable, that people like her should know better than to sit where decent people ate. The woman sat frozen in her chair. Her hands gripped the edge of the table. The man kept going. He said the cafe should have standards, that letting homeless people sit around was bad for business. He turned to the counter and demanded to speak to the manager. Sam felt something hot rise in his chest. He set down the dishes he was holding and walked over. He placed himself between the man and the woman's table. His voice came out steady and cold. He told the man that she was a paying customer and had every right to be there. The man laughed and said paying customer was generous, considering how little she put down. Sam said it did not matter. She was welcome here, and the man needed to leave her alone. The man's face got redder. He stepped closer to Sam and said, maybe Sam should find a better class of people to defend. Maybe then he would not be stuck working in a dump like this. Sam felt his hands ball into fists. He told the man to get out. The man looked surprised. He said, excuse me, like he could not believe what he was hearing. Sam repeated himself. The man needed to leave. Now. Becca had come out from behind the counter. Tony stood near the kitchen door. Neither of them said anything. The man looked around the cafe like he was waiting for someone to back him up. No one did. He grabbed his briefcase and stormed toward the door. He slammed it hard enough that the bell chimed 3 times. The cafe was silent for a moment. Then slowly, people went back to their coffee and their conversations. Sam turned around. The woman was looking up at him. Her eyes were wet, and her hands were still gripping the table. She opened her mouth like she wanted to say something, but nothing came out. Sam just nodded at her. Then he went back to clearing tables, like nothing had happened. But his hands were shaking. That afternoon, when his shift ended, the woman was still sitting in her corner. She was writing in a small notebook. When she saw Sam putting on his jacket, she stood up and walked over to him. She said, "Thank you." Her voice was quiet but steady. Sam told her it was nothing. She shook her head and said it was not nothing. She said most people would have looked away, that he did not have to do what he did. Sam shrugged and said the man was out of line. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she said his son was lucky to have him. Sam felt his throat tighten. He did not know what to say to that. So he just nodded and left. For the next few days, the woman kept coming to the cafe. She and Sam talked more. Small conversations. Nothing deep. But Sam started to feel like he knew her, even though he did not know her name. He knew the way she held her coffee cup, the way she folded the napkin after she ate, the way she looked at Luke when he came in, like she was seeing something precious that she had lost. She would sit in the corner and cry sometimes. Not loudly, just silent tears running down her face while she stared at nothing. Other times, she would flinch when someone walked too close. Sam noticed these things, but did not know how to ask about them. One afternoon, near the end of his shift, Sam saw her sitting with her head down on the table. Her shoulders were shaking. He walked over and said, "Hey," softly. He asked if she was all right. She did not lift her head. She just shook it slowly. Sam crouched down next to her table and asked what was wrong. She lifted her head slightly. Her face was blotchy, and her eyes were red. She said she was just tired. Her voice cracked. Sam asked when the last time she ate something was. She did not answer. Sam went to the kitchen and came back with a sandwich, turkey and cheese on white bread. He set it down in front of her and told her to eat. She looked at the sandwich like she didn't know what to do with it. Then she picked it up and took a small bite. When his shift ended, she was still there. The sandwich was half-eaten. She was staring out the window. Sam grabbed his jacket and walked over. He told her she should go home. She looked at him and said she did not have a home. Sam felt his stomach drop. He had suspected as much. But hearing her say it out loud made it real. He asked where she slept. She shrugged and said different places. Sam thought about Luke, about the apartment they lived in. It was small, and the heat did not always work, but it was warm and safe. He thought about what it would be like to not have that. He told her she could not stay here, that they would lock up soon. She nodded. She stood up and pulled her jacket tighter around herself. Then she walked toward the door. Sam watched her go. He felt useless. The next morning, she was back. Later, when the cafe was quiet, she spoke to him. She asked if he was happy. The question caught him off guard. Sam asked what she meant. She gestured around the cafe and asked if he was happy here. Doing this. Sam thought about the early mornings and the low pay and the way his back hurt at the end of every shift. He thought about Luke and the bills and the field trip money he still had not figured out. He thought about the dream he used to have, about opening his own restaurant. That dream felt like it belonged to someone else now. He said honestly that he did not know, that he was getting by. She looked at him with those tired eyes and said that was not the same thing. She looked down at her coffee and asked if he ever thought about kindness, about whether it was worth anything. Sam shrugged and said he did not think about it much, that he just did what felt right. She smiled faintly and said that was rare, that most people calculate. They weigh the cost. They decide if it is worth it. She looked up at him and said he didn't do that. Sam felt uncomfortable. He said he just made coffee. She shook her head and said no, that he saw people, that he saw her, that everyone else looked away. A few days later, she asked him about his dream, about being a chef. She asked if he could do it, if he had the money and the time and no one depending on him. Would he? Sam thought about Luke, about how leaving his job would mean no income and no way to keep the apartment. He told her it did not matter, that he could not. She leaned forward and asked again, but if he could, would he? Sam met her eyes. There was something intense in her gaze. He said yeah. He would. She sat back. She smiled and said good. Sam asked why that mattered. She did not answer. She just went back to drinking her coffee. That conversation stuck with him. He thought about it while he cooked dinner for Luke. While he helped with homework, while he lay awake at night, he thought about what it would be like to start over, to have a chance. It felt impossible. But for the first time in years, he let himself imagine it. Then one morning, she did not come in. Sam made the coffee anyway, cut the toast, set it on her table. The seat stayed empty. The next day, she did not come in either. Sam felt the worry creeping back. He told himself she was fine, but he did not believe it. On the third day, he asked Becca if she had seen the woman. Becca shook her head and said maybe she finally got help, or maybe she just moved on. On the fourth day, Tony made a joke. He said the drifter must have frozen to death. Sam turned around and told him to shut his mouth. Tony looked shocked. So did Becca. Sam had never raised his voice at work before. Becca pulled him aside and said, "Look, she got it." That he felt bad for her, but he could not save everyone, that he could barely save himself. Sam knew she was right, but it did not make him feel any better. On the fifth day, Sam still made the coffee, still cut the toast. He set it on her table even though the seat was empty. At the end of his shift, he walked through the neighborhood. He checked the park, the bus stops, the alleys. He did not see her anywhere. That night, Luke asked him why he was sad. Sam said he wasn't sad. Luke did not believe him. Luke asked if it was because of the lady, the one who taught him to fold paper. He asked if she was okay. Sam did not know what to say. He pulled Luke into a hug and said quietly that he did not know, that he hoped so. On the sixth day, Sam woke up with a knot in his stomach. He got Luke ready for school, dropped him off, went to work. The cafe was the same as always, but the seat in the back corner was empty. Sam made the coffee, cut the toast, set it down. The routine had become something like a prayer, a way of hoping that she was still out there. Becca did not say anything this time. She just watched him with sad eyes. The day dragged on. Sam kept glancing at the door, waiting for it to open, waiting for her to walk in. She did not. At the end of the day, Sam took off his apron and looked back at the empty seat one more time. The cold coffee, the untouched toast. He did not know why it hurt so much. She was just a woman, a stranger, someone he barely knew. But she had become part of his routine, part of his day, and now she was gone. He thought about all the things he should have done. Should have asked her name, should have found her help, should have done more. But he had not. And now it was too late. The next morning, Sam went to work. He made the coffee, cut the toast, set it on the table. The seat was still empty, and he knew, deep down, that it was going to stay that way. The door swung open just after 9 in the morning. Sam was refilling the napkin dispensers when he heard it. He looked up and froze. 4 men in black suits walked in first. They were tall and broad-shouldered and moved like they had done this 1,000 times before. Behind them came 2 people in gray, a man and a woman. They carried briefcases and wore the kind of clothes that cost more than Sam made in a month. The cafe went quiet. Everyone stopped talking. Even the espresso machine seemed to hum softer. The woman in gray looked around the room. Her eyes were sharp and calculating. She walked up to the counter where Becca was standing. She said, "Excuse me." Her voice was calm and professional. She said she was looking for someone, a man named Samuel Rodriguez. She asked if he worked here. Becca nodded slowly. She pointed at Sam without saying a word. The woman turned and looked at him. So did the man beside her. So did all 4 of the men in black. Sam felt his heart start to pound. People like this did not walk into places like Beacon Street Cafe unless something was very wrong. The woman walked over to him. She stopped a few feet away and studied his face. She asked if he was Samuel Rodriguez. Sam nodded. His mouth was too dry to speak. The woman said her name was Margaret Calloway. That she was an attorney representing the estate of Amelia Rose Hart. She gestured to the man beside her and said this was her colleague, Richard Brennan. She said they needed to speak with him. Sam felt the floor tilt under him. Amelia. That was her name. He had never known it before. And now this woman was standing in front of him saying words like estate and attorney. Sam asked what was going on. His voice came out hoarse. Margaret looked at him with something that might have been sympathy. She said perhaps they should sit down. Sam led them to the back corner, to the table where she used to sit. The coffee cup was still there, cold and untouched. Margaret glanced at it but did not say anything. The 4 men in black suits stayed near the door. Margaret and Richard opened their briefcases and pulled out folders. They sat down across from Sam. Margaret began by saying she was very sorry to inform him that Amelia Rose Hart passed away 3 nights ago. Sam felt something cold rush through him. He had known. Deep down, he had known. But hearing it out loud made it real. He asked quietly how. Margaret said heart failure, that she had been ill for some time, that she knew it was coming. Sam stared at the table. He thought about the way she had looked the last time he saw her, thin and tired and fragile. He thought about the shaking hands, the tears. Sam asked why they were here. His voice was barely a whisper. Margaret exchanged a glance with Richard. Then she looked back at Sam and said, because Miss Hart left very specific instructions, that she wanted them to find him, that she wanted them to deliver something to him personally. Sam looked up at her and asked what. Richard pulled out an envelope. It was thick and cream-colored and sealed with wax. He slid it across the table. Margaret said before he opened that there was something he needed to know. That Amelia Rose Hart wasn't who he thought she was. Sam frowned and asked what she meant. Margaret leaned forward slightly and said Miss Hart was a very wealthy woman. That she inherited a significant fortune from her family. That at the time of her death, her estate was valued at approximately $900 million. Sam blinked. He looked at Margaret like she had just spoken a different language. He said that was not possible. That she was homeless. That she did not have anything. Richard said quietly that she had everything. She just chose not to show it. Margaret nodded and explained. 2 years ago, Miss Hart experienced a series of personal tragedies. She lost her parents in a car accident. Her fiancé left her shortly after. She fell into a deep depression and withdrew from her life entirely. She began living anonymously, moving from place to place, trying to understand who she was without her wealth and status. She wanted to see how people would treat her when she had nothing. Sam felt his throat tighten. He thought about the worn jacket, the tangled hair, the way she had flinched when people got too close. He thought about how everyone in the cafe had avoided her, had called her names, everyone except him. Margaret continued. She said Amelia came to this cafe because it was ordinary, because no one knew who she was, and for months, no one treated her like a person. No one except him. Richard said she wrote about Sam in her journal, about the way he made her coffee, the way he cut her toast into small pieces, the way he never asked her for anything, never made her feel small. She wrote that Sam was the only person who saw her as human. Sam felt his eyes start to burn. He blinked hard. Margaret reached into her briefcase again and pulled out a check. She slid it across the table next to the envelope. Sam looked down at it. The number was written in neat black ink. $1 million. He stared at it. His brain could not process what he was seeing. Margaret said this was for him. That Miss Hart wanted him to have it. That she left instructions that it was to be delivered to him personally, along with that letter. Sam shook his head and said he could not take this. Richard said he could, and he should. that it was her wish. Sam looked at the check again. He thought about Luke, about the overdue bills, about the apartment with the broken heat, about the dream he had given up, about all the things he could do with that money. But he also thought about her, about the woman who had sat in this chair and drank cold coffee, about the way she had smiled at Luke, about the way she had asked him if he would start over if he could. He picked up the envelope and opened it. Inside was a single piece of paper. The handwriting was neat and careful. He recognized it from the notebook she used to carry. The letter read, "Dear Sam, if you are reading this, then I am gone. I could not say goodbye in person, but you saved me, not by fixing me or rescuing me. You just treated me like I mattered. And that was everything. I spent 2 years trying to find out who I was without money, without status. What I found was that most people did not see me at all. I was invisible. But you saw me. You made me coffee. You cut my toast. You let your son talk to me like I was a person worth knowing. You did all of that without knowing who I was. You did it because it was the right thing to do. I am leaving you this money because I want you to have the chance to start over. But more than that, I am leaving it to you because I trust you. Thank you for seeing me, Sam. Thank you for treating me like I was worth something. With gratitude, Amelia." Sam read the letter twice. Then he folded it carefully and put it back in the envelope. His hands were still shaking. His eyes were wet. He wiped them quickly with the back of his hand. Margaret and Richard sat quietly and waited. The cafe around them had gone back to its usual noise, but at this table, everything was still. Sam asked what he was supposed to do with this. His voice cracked. Margaret said that was up to him, that the money was his, no conditions, no strings, that she trusted him to decide. Sam looked at the check again. He thought about Luke, about the life he could give him with this money, a better apartment, a better school, security. But he also thought about Amelia, about the way she had looked at him when she asked if kindness was worth anything. He thought about what she would want him to do. Sam folded the check and put it in his pocket. Then he looked at Margaret and said he wanted to set up a fund, a charity, for people like her, people who need help, women who are struggling, kids who do not have enough, people who are invisible. Margaret studied him for a long moment. Then she smiled. It was small but genuine. She said she thought Amelia knew he would say that. Over the next few weeks, Sam worked with Margaret and Richard to establish the Amelia Rose Hart Foundation. The fund would provide support for homeless women, children in need, and anyone who had fallen through the cracks. It would pay for meals and shelter and medical care. Sam did not quit his job at the cafe. He still worked the morning shift. He still made coffee and cut toast. But now, every morning, he set aside a portion of his tips and added it to the foundation. It was not much, but it was something. Luke asked him once why he gave the money away, why he did not use it to make their life easier. Sam thought about how to answer that. Then he told Luke about Amelia, about the woman who used to sit in the corner, about the way she had taught him to fold paper. Sam said she taught him something important, that people matter, even when no one else sees them, even when they do not have anything to give back. They still matter. Luke thought about that. Then he nodded and said he thought she was right. On a cold Saturday morning in December, Sam and Luke drove to the cemetery. Sam carried a thermos of coffee and a small bag with a piece of toast inside. He had cut it into small pieces, the way he always did. They walked through the rows of headstones until they found hers. It was simple. Just her name and the dates. Amelia Rose Hart. Beloved daughter. Beloved friend. Sam knelt down and set the coffee and the toast on the ground, in front of the stone. Luke stood beside him and put his hand on Sam's shoulder. Luke asked quietly if she was really here. Sam shook his head and said no, that he did not think so, that she was somewhere else, somewhere better, Luke looked at the headstone and asked if Sam missed her. Sam nodded and said, "Yeah." He did. They stood there for a while in silence. The wind blew cold and the sky was gray. But Sam did not feel cold. He felt something else, something warm and solid in his chest. He thought about the letter, about the words she had written. "You saw me. You treated me like I was worth something." He thought about all the people in the world who felt invisible, who felt like they did not matter, who sat in the corners of cafes and waited for someone to notice them. And he made a promise, to her, to himself, to everyone who needed it. He would keep seeing them. He would keep treating them like they mattered, because they did. Sam stood up and took Luke's hand. They walked back through the cemetery together. Behind them, the coffee sat steaming in the cold air. The toast sat waiting. And somewhere, Sam hoped, Amelia was smiling.